All right, guys, so thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to have you all here with me today. And we have organizations from across the United States, which is exciting. And you're going to get a chance to connect with everybody in just a little bit. So my presentation is going to be about 20 minutes. And then we're going to have time for your live questions at the end. And of course, we're going to have a breakout session before that where you're going to actually start crafting your own story. So as we begin today, I want to be a little bit zen, okay? And I want to get you really in your bodies. So I want to ask you all to close your eyes, sit up as tall in your body as you can, and I want you to take 3 consecutive big, deep breaths and let them out. So take them in slowly and let them out equally as slowly. And as you're doing that, I want you to think about a time in your life when you really felt like one of the earliest times that you really felt empowered and strong and fast and swift. Maybe it was when you were a child and you first learned how to ride a bike without your training wheels on, like I did when I was 6 years old. Maybe it was a time when you were running really, really fast, or you were skating, or you were scooting, and you felt like you were flying. And you felt like if you had a cape at that moment, you would have superpowers. You would be a superhero. And just kind of remember that feeling and just let it resonate through you, okay? And hold on to it for a moment. And now I want you to open your eyes, and I want to tell you that storytelling can give you that same feeling of being a superpower. And that's what we're here for today. And now, of course, there we go. So as we begin this journey, we're going to start talking about storytelling as a superpower that you can connect to personally, and then you can share this with your colleagues, your team, your network, and beyond. So why stories, and particularly why short stories, which is our topic of today? And this is where Pedal Love is different than I think just about any other active mobility or sustainability communications organization. And that is that we don't just tell you that storytelling is great, we actually teach you the art and craft of storytelling, and we break it up for you in a really hands-on way so that you can go forward and use it. And we focus everything right now on and getting you to do 2 to 3 minute stories, because those are a small bite-sized chew that you can easily take home and practice. And 2 to 3 minute stories are an incredibly valuable tool, and you should have several of these in your back pocket. Why? Think about it. A 2 or 3 minute story is the length of time that you might have to give a testimony at a legislative session, that you might be allowed to give a testimony at a city council meeting, that you might have a conversation for fundraising when we can meet in person again, or maybe on the phone, for a presentation or a keynote that can be folded in, for a media interview, for a blog, for an email newsletter, and beyond. And we cover the hero's journey. Excuse me, I went ahead of myself. And here's what I'm going to be covering today. So I'm going to talk today about why you need skin in the game. You personally need skin in the game as a storyteller. I'm going to talk about the shape and structure of stories and why that is really important. And then I'm going to give you my map for the simplified hero's journey. You're going to start drafting your own short story, and then we're going to have time for your questions. So skin in the game, let's talk about that. Why is your story so important? You may feel that your story, your personal story for active mobility, or any of them, isn't right as a front-facing tool for your organization. And you may be right. You might not be the epitome of who you want to talk about. That might be the people that you serve. That's okay. You still want to know your own story and be able to share it, because if you want to teach other people how to tell their stories, if you want to do work in the community and you want to gather their stories, you need to show them, you need to demonstrate that you can be authentic and brave and share your story. You need to walk the walk. You wouldn't tell somebody how to ride a bicycle, you would actually show them how to ride a bicycle. So later on in an email newsletter today that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share an audio clip on SoundCloud of my short story of getting on a bike again. And so you're going to see me have skin in the game, but today this is all about you. So let's talk about the shape and structure of stories and why that's so important. So just like a house or any kind of building needs to have really strong infrastructure in order for it to stand up and last, stories need structure. If stories don't have structure, if they don't have at least a beginning, a middle, and an end, they aren't satisfying to the human brain. Our brains are wired for storytelling. It's literally in our DNA. But unless stories have particular structures, tried and true structures over hundreds and thousands of years, we don't find them satisfying. And if they're not satisfying, they're not effective. So a story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end at the very minimum. Otherwise, it's not a story, it's an anecdote, and it's not effective. So Freytag's pyramid is the classic narrative arc. In the 19th century, the poet and playwright Gustav Freytag did research to discover what the stories that stood the test of time, that were still popular at that time in the 1800s, like the Greek myths and Shakespeare play, what they all had in common. And he recognized that they had this 5-step pyramid shape structure. Hold the idea of this structure in your mind, the pyramid, when you're thinking about your story. Then there's something called the hero's journey, which is a story type. It's the most popular story type of all time. There's actually only like 7 story types, and 5 of them can be hero's journeys. So the hero's journey is a tagline that became popular first in the 1970s and then in the 1990s in popular culture, and here's why. It was created by a gentleman by the name of Professor Joseph Campbell for his book in the 1940s, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And it happened to be a book that George Lucas of Star Wars fame read when he was in college. And in about 1974, George Lucas was stuck. He had the money together to do the first Star Wars movie, but the script just wasn't working. So he went back to the hero's journey and he used it to revamp the script and his whole series of Star Wars stories. That became such a successful franchise that in the 90s, a movie executive used it to do a treaty about storytelling. And since then, Hollywood has used it, but they've been a little too literal. So you want to know why we have so many superhero stories? It's because of the hero's journey. But the hero's journey is what we focus on at Petal Love, mostly for advocacy, because it's the story of transformation and it's internal as much as external. So my 10-step map takes Joseph Campbell's hero's journey story, which is a very complex thing with 17 steps and magical intervention that most of us don't have access to anymore, and takes Freytag's pyramid, simplifies it down into a 10-step story map that you can use personally and with your teams to easily create compelling and memorable, effective stories. And again, we focus on hero's journey stories because they're about transformation. And that's what we're all here about today. So let's go through those 10 steps. The first thing is you've got to be clear about your purpose. So I asked you guys to do some homework and write down a sentence of a story that you wanted to tell, a personal story, and it needs to be in alignment with something you want to do. So think about the fact that you might be on the leadership team and you're not going to be telling a story in an email newsletter, but you may want to engage your leadership team, or you might want to be engaging your board. So think about a story that was going to serve some kind of purpose for you this fall, all right? And that whatever you're going to be asking people to do, that story needs to humanize and clarify that purpose. So it might be new infrastructure, it might be a separated bike lane, it might be a new policy, it might be creating rapport, better rapport on your leadership team or with your advisory board. Whatever it is, that story that you're gonna use, that you're gonna craft, needs to be in alignment with that purpose. So right now, what I want you to do is take 1 minute and just write the story. Write a purpose statement. Like you have something that you want to do this fall. You want to use your story to illustrate a purpose. Okay. And just very quickly, I'm going to put my timer on here and think about it and write down what's a purpose that you really have in mind that you really need to focus on with your fall communications that you want to bring forward with a story. Could be fundraising, could be getting people to respond and start conversations with your social media more. It could be showing up for something. It could be an online training like this, whatever it is, write down that purpose. One of the things you really want to do this fall in the next few months that you want to make happen. Okay, so we just have about 20 more seconds. And we're done. Okay, so set that aside. Whoops, sorry about that, you guys. We're gonna set that aside and we're gonna come back to that in just a little bit. Okay, so the next thing you wanna do, the set, is you wanna set the scene. And perhaps the most famous line in the English language that sets the scene for a story is, "It was a dark and stormy night." So this is the exposition. This is how you bring people right into the story. And if you look at your favorite books, your favorite movies, your favorite TV shows, and books, it can be autobiography, it can be any kind of book, it can be fact or fiction, but look at how in the first 2 paragraphs, they draw you right into the story. They boom, and you feel yourself being there. So I want you to be studying that in the next week and think about, how can you do that with your own story? How could you really set the scene about what's going on in the neighborhood, in the city, on the street, etc. And next, the thing that really gets the story going is something called the inciting incident or the rising action. So what happened to start you on this hero's journey? What sparked things? What was the conflict? Did you get hit by a car? Did somebody in your organization get hurt, or somebody, a child in an area that you do advocacy for? Did you have to give up your car like I did because of health reasons and learn how to ride transit and the bus and then save a lot of money and then get excited about active mobility advocacy? What was the thing? It could be a health thing. You could have started riding your bike because you wanted to lower your blood pressure. Whatever it was, that's the inciting incident that really kicks things into high gear. It could be a good thing, could be, but usually it's a conflict. Usually it's something challenging. Next, so the fourth thing is, did you meet a mentor? Did somebody show up to help you? Did somebody come along and give you advice? Did they support you or guide you in any way? This is not critical. You don't have to have this, but if you do have this, it would be a fantastic thing to share. So think about, who is your mentor? And somebody's writing to me, yeah, you were hit by a driver. That was my bad. That was the wrong language. So you weren't hit by a car, you were hit by a driver. Let's see if we can get this to, okay. Now, the fifth thing, and this is the top of the pyramid. Remember I said you wanted to keep that in your mind when you're working on your story, is the climax. And this is the height of the action. This is when you face enemies. This is when you find new allies. This is when you overcome the biggest obstacles and you answer some of the big questions. So there's a lot that goes on in the climax. And then we have, and this is what really makes stories interesting for people, is that you never are in the clear after the climax. You think you might be in the clear, and there's one more complication. So this is the falling action, when there's one or more roadblocks on the road. You thought you were going to pass it through the city council. You thought the funding was going to come through. What, you know, the myriads of things happen to you, and you need to share that because that's part of the interest of the story. Then we want to talk about the hero's transformation. So during the inciting incident, the climax, and the falling, you were dealing with a lot of struggles, right? Now you need to share something that you overcame, and it should be internal as well as external. In fact, it might be more internal than it is external. This is where you have aha moments. Okay, this is the superpower of storytelling, because these aha moments where you change your worldview is where the whole DNA, neurotransmitters, oxytocin, dopamine, all of that stuff comes together. And this is where people see themselves in their story. You could have hated people on bicycles, then decided to start riding to lower your cholesterol, and suddenly you're a bike advocate. You could have hated the idea of a walkable neighborhood, and then you had to give up your car for some reason, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, these sidewalks are terrible. So this is where you flip the script for people, and they see their world anew through you. Now, I want to say a note about this, in that your stories need to be balanced. And here's the irony of human beings. You need to share your struggle and your overcoming. This is something that I learned from the best-selling author Carmine Gallo of The Storyteller's Secret and Talk Like TED. You want to think of your story, again, remember it's a pyramid, and you also want to think of it as a balanced three-leg stool. So you need to share your overcoming as much as your struggle. Otherwise, people will see you as a victim. Now, here's the irony. At least one person here is the victim of being hit by a driver in a car. But if you lead only with the struggle, if you focus on the struggle and do not share overcoming, people will turn off, they will get overwhelmed, they will hide under the bed and not want to really deal with your story. So you've also got to show the overcoming. If, on the other hand, you're like, say, a marketing company for the bike industry, and you focus on only the fabulousness and the speed and the winning, for most people, that's just too much bragging and they don't see themselves in it. So you really want to have balance, not too spicy, not too sweet, not too hot, not too cold. Be balanced between the two. The eighth thing you want to do is, for each one of these steps I've shared so far, you want to write a paragraph or two for the story. And then you want to go back through it and you want to see, where can you share sense memories? Where can you share what you heard, what you tasted, what you smelled, what you smelled, what you felt? Was it sunny? Was it freezing? Was it raining? Was it snowing? Was it noisy out? Could you hear the traffic? Was there some lovely music? Was it dead silence? Was it daytime? Was it nighttime? Whatever it was, that's going to really bring people into the story with a sense memory. And you're going to really have people paying attention to you. This idea is from the top storytelling coach, Babette Buster of Do Story. And then finally, the ninth thing when you're crafting this story together is that you want to have your resolution and call to action. So your resolution wraps your story up with a bow for now. And you might say to me, Melissa, we haven't raised the money, the matching funds yet to make that separated bike lane happen. That's okay. You've still done a story of something. So you want to narrow the focus of what happened. Did you get it passed through the city council? Did you raise awareness and interest in the public and support for it? Tell the story now. Wrap it up with a bow for now. And then what's the call to action that's going to help the story move forward to its next volume 2, part 2? So that's what you want to put together in that. And remember, you started with your purpose and you end with your purpose. So this is where making sure that your story is aligned with your purpose is in your call to action. Now, you want to take those 10 steps and draft out your story. And you want to make sure it's only about 2 to 3 minutes long, so it's really useful to you in whatever way you want to use it. And then we're going to talk about why the 10th step is really important, and this is what most people skip, and that is approach matters as much as content. And when I say approach, I mean how the story is presented to your audience is as important as what's in it. And this is really hard for smart people and engineering types to take, because we think, oh, if we just show you the data, or if I just point it all out, it's going to be good enough. No, you have to perform the story. So it's all about what language is it descriptive and interesting that you use, whether you're saying it or whether you're writing it. What is your tone? What is your pacing? What's your grammar? What's the sound quality? What's the video quality? All these different things come together. And this is something that I learned when I was in Toastmasters in my mid-20s. But again, from the TED speaker, Amy Cuddy, who did Your Body Language Shapes Who You Are, one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. And then she wrote the book Presence. So you want to give your story time to flourish. So think about crafting the story over the next month, and then using it in October, November, December to do whatever it is that you want to do. Take the time to draft it out. Take the time to record yourself on your phone or your computer so that you can hear how you're telling it, and time yourself to make sure that it's actually hitting, it's no longer than those 3 minutes, and maximum no longer than 5 minutes. You want to say this story. You don't want to say it verbatim. You don't want to have it completely memorized, and you want it to be fresh and lively. You want to make sure that you are putting an interesting tone in your voice that's really going to draw people in, whether you're doing this just on audio, whether you're doing it just on video. And again, even if you're just writing it, you want to make sure that you're using interesting language. Okay, so now I'm going to give you guys your turn, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all your faces. Great. And for the next 5 minutes or so, I want you to write out your story. So if you brought a sentence with you about what your story is, you can do that. If you didn't, you can start with something new, but write down this sentence. What's the purpose for sharing this story? Remember, we had the purpose. So you've probably already written that down. If you haven't yet, write it down. Then briefly do the exposition. Set the scene of where you're at for this story. And then the third thing, what was the inciting incident or the rising action that started you on the journey? So we're not going to do the whole story today. We're just going to do the beginning 3 things in the next 5 minutes. And I'm going to turn on some groovy music here and time it and go.
Melissa, could you put the 3 things in the chat?
Yes.
Thanks.
We're at about 3 minutes, so you still got plenty of time. We just have a minute and a half left. So start wrapping up your story. Thirty seconds. Okay, that's it, everybody. That's time's up. Oops, here we go. All right, so I'm going to ask people to unmute yourselves, and let's have some questions about the process and what's going on for you.
I'll go. I came up with a situation which met my purpose, I think, but it seems so trivial. Maybe it'll work. We'll see.
Why don't you first tell us what your purpose is, so we can be in the idea with you.
My major focus with my bicycling advocacy is in behavior modification training, teaching, educating people about how to get along in the environment that we have. Not so much changing the infrastructure, but I get involved with that too. So my purpose was to encourage people that there is something to learn about bicycling that even I experienced, and then hopefully they'll follow through with realizing there's value to getting more information and skill.
So you want to humanize and clarify with your story. So what's the story that you came up with that would humanize and clarify, and you feel it's too simple?
Well, and that's my struggle. The situation I came up with is when I was learning to to bicycle in traffic. There are left turn pockets on the roadway, left turn only lane. And I was smart enough to position myself in the left turn pocket, but because I was learning bicycling at the time and trying to get more effective, I was clipped in to my pedals. So the safest or the easiest thing I could do with those intersections was to come up to the front of the intersection on the left-hand side and lean on the pole, put my hand out and lean on the pole. And therefore I didn't have to unclip and I was ready to start. Well, the problem was the motorist would come up next to me on the right. And when the light changed, I'd be stuck in the middle of the lane. So I needed to figure out what to do about that.
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right there and say it's not too simple. It's not too simple. It's really to take it's fine to focus in on a really small episode like that and really bring people into that moment, because you've got all kinds of things there that anyone can relate to, and your struggle and overcoming is going to be really engaging. So hold on to that, but we want to make sure that we have other people chime in here about what they're doing. Okay, who else wants to share something that they're struggling with, or you're thrilled because you had an aha moment? Raise a hand. Otherwise I'll call on people, so just know
there's virtual hands up.
Okay, Eris.
Okay, well, I sort of, my purpose and then my story got very disconnected. So I may have to, I figure I'll run with story and then figure out if it serves a purpose, or else I'll drop whatever. But right now, fundraising is all in my mind. I spent yesterday, I gave a 3-minute pitch to a group of potential funders. But then going back to an inciting incident took me somewhere else completely. So I'll just take you there. So my early years were spent in Los Angeles.
No, we don't want you to perform it right now. Nope. This is not about performing. We're going to go back to your purpose. We're going to go back to your purpose, because I will not have done you any good if you are in fundraising mode right now. And that's the most important thing that you've got to do this fall. And you haven't thought about a story that can align with your purpose.
Okay.
Even though I would love to hear your story, because I know you're going to perform it fabulously. And I'm going to ask you to do that story that you want to do as the selfie challenge this month. Okay. But you think right now, just chill for a little bit. And I'm going to go to Gerald's question. I'm going to come back to you and think about where is a story about the need of fundraising that aligns with you and bicycling. So just,
it has to be my story and not a story of someone else.
It has to be your story. This time it's going to be your story somehow. So just we're going to come back to it, but this is why this is a workshop. Okay. So hold on to that. So Gerald, you had your hand up.
Yeah. So can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
So I kind of did this backwards. I did question number 1 based on what I wanted to say in 2 and 3. And the purpose is to convince people who are fellow advocates that to not have preconceived expectations of the beliefs of the people to whom we are advocating. Sometimes I go into a meeting with city people and I think that they're all going to be against us, and that's a presupposition that perhaps is not as productive as it might be. Number 2, the exposition of my story is on a bike ride that my wife and I took on the Natchez Trace from Nashville to Natchez, Mississippi. And we are Easterners, like Philadelphia kind of people. And so that part of the country was like a foreign land in so many ways. And number 3, the inciting incident was we were off trace. We were in a group, but had been by ourselves for a couple of hours down some little 2-lane road in the middle of nowhere. And in my mirror, I could see this huge black pickup truck, the size of a battleship, and roaring down the road at us. And I thought, oh crap, what's going to happen here? Because nobody was around us. We were alone. And the guy pulls up to us, reaches from the driver's seat. He's big enough to reach across to the window on the passenger side with an arm the size of my leg, rolls down the window, and he shouts out at us, "You're not from here, are you?" And we said, "No, we're really not." And he said, "Well, you're going to have a great time. It's real beautiful here, and you're really going to enjoy it." And then pulled off at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Awesome.
So we have things that are unexpected sometimes, and we shouldn't
Awesome.
always assume that the people who we're talking to about advocacy are going to be intransient.
Gerald, you hit it. Great. So hold that. We're going to come back. Eris, I want to give one more person, unless you're super clear that you know what it is, because we're going to get there, Eris. Don't worry, we're going to get there. Okay, Cully, I'm going to call on you. You're going to.
I was this close to unmuting anyways. So my purpose is to engage more everyday people, non-cyclists, and have them become voices for our advocacy organization for bipolar experience, and possibly become members and get involved in other ways. And my exposition was kind of starting from where I fell in love with riding bicycles as a form of transportation, which was living in Chicago and living in the urban environment and getting around by bicycle, and all the awesome urban settings there.
And what's your insight? What's your inciting incident?
Moving to Colorado Springs. So coming here with some sort of expectation, well, wanting to be able to ride everywhere and get around that way. And there's some ways that I can, but then other ways that it's a challenge and it's not as urban as Chicago. So
Got it. Okay, so hold on to that because I see that we're close to their 40 minutes, or actually we're right there. And does anybody need to leave, that they need to have, they want to have their question answered or go through their steps before? Anybody else? Everybody good? Okay. Eris, are you ready with your thought? Are you still?
No, I can't listen to other people and think my own at the same
Yeah,
time.
okay.
And
All
I've
right.
chosen to be listening to the other
Okay,
folks.
cool, cool. So Jefferson, I'm going to call, Jeff, I'm going to call on you. And what happened for you? We need you to unmute if you can. You can't, let's see.
There it is.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we sure can.
Yeah, so I studied screenwriting and animation, and so I've been thinking about all this stuff for years. So it's really refreshing to hear you talk about the process. I'm not so much working on anything that's about bicycle advocacy. I got really sick in 2019, and so I want to tell that story and make it an account of that during the pandemic. Like, it happened right at the start of the pandemic, and
Yeah.
so yeah, my purpose is really just to make an account, a historical account, and yeah, so it just starts with me getting sick during my vacation in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Right. Boom. There you
And then
are.
everything else just kind of like the world starting to go completely insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I deal with chronic health challenges, so I know, yeah, it's a different world, isn't it? Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Who else would like to share their 3 things that they are, because I am going to call on you. So Katrina, I know you're not on FaceTime. You want to jump in and share yours?
This actually has been a really great, so I've been off camera just because I wanted to actually listen to everybody. Similar to Eris, I think that I'm absorbing the ways in which other people are pitching things and thinking about their personal stories. I don't think I'm there yet, but this has been valuable, so thank you.
So I'm going to share with you guys a link. Let's see if this is going to work. This is the 10-step. Oh, no, it's not going to let me. Okay. I'm going to email you. I'm going to email you all my 10-step story map because it won't let me. It's interesting to figure out what you can do ahead of time with Zoom and what you can't. And okay, so you're going to get a 4-page digital to download. It's my full map that I've been teaching from today with questions, and you can go through all of your questions, and you can share it. You can print it out with everybody, and you can talk through things. And I would say, Eris, if you're really struggling with the purpose, run it by some people. Like, this is the story that really excites me right now to tell, and this is the purpose, and I'm not sure how they could connect. And your team or your close friends and advocacy can give you wise counsel of, oh no, that actually does serve your purpose if you look at it through this lens. Or, you know what, the story about that ride, remember, 6 years ago, that's how you really got involved in advocacy. So you can, sometimes you're too close to it. And Katrina, I would say the same thing. Sometimes you're too close to it. If any of you are struggling and you can't figure out what the story is, think about Jim's story of getting stuck in the middle of intersections, and don't take a story that's like this. Take a story that's like this first, right? Because Gerald's is boom, 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 right? It's because if Gerald was going to go share that story in front of a city council or people, an African-American church, let's say, or some group that you thought they're not with us, but man, if they were with us, we would just really start going places with bikeable, walkable communities. So it's, you know, it's all laid out just like that, that it becomes really clear about why this particular story is being shared. And again, remember, yeah, you do want to train your teams to do this, and you want to train those you serve to do this, because those you serve might be the stories that front facing in your email newsletters and for fundraising that you really want to share. But for this fall, it might be stories of people on your board and why they're so passionate about what you're doing. You might get the board trained first, right? And then go out next to those you serve. Cynthia, do you have any questions about this?
No, I think my story was too broad. And after hearing you say that, I think I really need to narrow it down to one specific incident and then keep it focused more like that. I think I went way too broad for mine.
You know what? We all do that. We all do that. And I'm taking I want to tell you guys that I'm taking an online course. Have any of you heard of Seth Godin? Do you know who Seth Godin is? Okay, so he invented a platform, he and his team, called Akimbo for online learning. And the great marketing writer, Bernadette Jiwa, is doing an online course that I jumped into. And I dragged my feet on taking the course. It's a month long. We have stuff we have to do every day. And they really, again, like, I knew to narrow in, but they were like super narrow in. So you could, at different times, like if this is the story of you and bike advocacy, or you and mobility advocacy, or you and sustainability, you think of like the timeline and then take chunks of it and think of, for your purpose for this fall, what was the moment that kind of like where you went from being like Cully, like you went from being like somebody who just rides a bike to, oh wow, now I'm an advocate. Eris, that's probably the story you're looking for. When did you go from I just really like to ride to I better get involved with creating safer streets? That, you know, so you know, think of like when you're doing movies, right, Jeff? Like you're editing a movie and you're editing video, and it's got this timeline, and you can take bits of it. You just want to focus in on one little aspect of the story, because again, approach is as important as content. And Gerald really had it. You already know how to tell a story. Jeff, you'd be doing the same thing. Bryson, Trini, Cecile, any of you have questions that you haven't jumped in on it? Nina, any of you that haven't spoken yet?
Yeah, I have a question kind of about the broadness or general versus specific. So I guess I'll back up a little bit. So my purpose would be to build a better or more developed cycling culture locally. My setting the scene, at first I kind of went way back, and then I realized, well, that's, you know, it's only 2 or 3 or 4 minutes or whatever. So it was kind of a transition from rediscovering riding a bike for transportation and just how fun it was in college in San Luis Obispo, and then moving back. So somebody else, I forget who it was, mentioned that was sort of the inciting incident, was just moving to a new place. So are you looking for those sorts of very specific things, or it's because it seemed to me like the conflict is, well, I moved back, but the issue really is we don't have we don't have bike parking, we don't have an educated driver, you know, pool and stuff like that. So
that's okay, and that can be, but those are your
conflict, I guess.
Moving back was the inciting incident, and then that's all like up here, right? This is that's like the high, like we don't, and then you move back and you're like, great, it's like one of the most bike friendly cities, and then you're like, no, it's not. Like, and then you have like all your challenges and your challenges and your challenges and your challenges, right? So can be very something like, yeah, it can be something very narrow like that. And then that, you don't have to try to go after everything. For example, for myself, there's 2 stories that I tell right now. And that one is how I started riding a bike again. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. I hadn't been on a bike in 30 years and started riding a bike again. And it's the story of me getting on a bike again. And so that you're going to hear that story tonight. I'm not going to tell you anything else. It was one night. Okay. Then I have a story about how I gave up my car. So my story that I told for a long time was getting back on a bike again, and it was like, woohoo. But the real story was that had to give up my car because of health and financial challenges. And that was what really got me interested in active mobility, because I was riding the bus again, and it was a very different experience per Gerald. It was a very different experience than what I thought it was going to be. So it was my aha moment. So you're looking for really strong aha moments where a script was flipped in your mind about what it meant. Jeff, it might be who's sick, right? Versus who's healthy. Like, it can happen to anybody, and you don't think that way until it happens to you. So we've gone over time a little bit. I want to answer any last questions, but also, again, remember, this is a opportunity for you to connect with other people who want to tell stories, right? So if you want to share your email here in text with everybody, to anybody else who also wants to get together with you. And I'm going to share in an email newsletter follow-up, because again, it won't let me move off of this to share with you my link. Taking this online class has inspired me to have it be September Selfie Story Month. And so I want to invite all of you to consider taking this story map that I'm going to share with you, crafting a story, and I want you to either record it on audio or do a video. And it's really good if you start with audio and then you move to video. And I will share with you in the email newsletter tonight, SoundCloud. I'll share with you Audacity, which is free. They're both free. And so you can record things really nicely and start a conversation with your team about it. Get them involved in it. And then if you've got a story that you really like, I will share it on Pedal Love. Okay, I'll share it on, and it's going to be a way where you're going to really show your team and those you serve that you got skin in the game. How does that sound? You're all like, ah, but you can do this. And Eris, you're going to figure out, you know what? You're going to go for a walk today. You're going to go for a bike ride, and it's going to click. Don't force it. Katrina, same thing. Don't force it. This is the kind of thing that you are going to get in the shower, or like me, I had, for example, this is the 10th anniversary of Pedal Love. And when I started it, it was called Women on Bikes SoCal. And it was a really wonky name. And I wanted to move statewide. I was starting to work with the California Bicycle Coalition as their media person. And I wanted to go statewide. And people were like, no, just Women on Bikes California. It's great. And then like at 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with the name Pedal Love in my head, and I wrote it down, and I went back to sleep. And I asked my sister, what do you think? And she's in marketing, and she's like, that's a gold mine. So you got to, everybody, the advocates are like, no, we like this, but to Gerald's point and Cully's point, if we want to get people that, the rest of the public is used to being seduced by fabulous marketing, right, Jeff? Fabulous storytelling. That is what we've got to do. We've got to become fabulous storytellers. Trini, you have a question.
Well, I just wanted to add, so I could go into the 3 points, but I know that we're very short of time, but I just wanted to share that my whole entire movement, which now has turned into a nonprofit, is based on selfie videos. And my mission is to rehumanize cyclists and all users of the road by creating these videos. And my call of action was in 2019, and I literally got hundreds of videos. Now we have over 300 ambassadors around the world, all trying to change this narrative. And yeah, it just kind of clicked with, and it was a very similar thing with It Could Be Me. I'm the founder of It Could Be Me. But that aha thing and that instant, well, would that work? And just going around the name that happened with you with Pedal Love. After my crash, I was hit in 2018. And after my crash, I no longer allowed my kids to ride their bikes to school for some time. I was terrified. And in one of those drives, I saw a cyclist, and I was like, oh, it could be me. That could be me. And that's how it kind of, but yeah, so
oh, I'm so glad you shared that. That's fantastic. So what I want to do is I want to leave this up for a few minutes and I want to step away. And if you guys want to say anything to each other, you want to share any, if you have to leave, that's fine. But if you want to share any comments with each other without me, like, being right here looking at everybody. Jeff, I want to ask you if you want to share any of your storytelling with us in the future, then any animations or anything like that, please, please do, because we would like it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna actually, let's see if they'll let me end the, yes, it'll let me stop recording.